Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adokru. Today I am very pleased to say we are joined by Mitch Hayward. Mitch is a pro FIFA player for Rise and England and recently represented Sheffield United at the ePremier League finals day, reaching the PlayStation final after beating last year's champion, #Tom, in the semis. So Mitch, welcome to the show and congrats on your ePremier League finish. Have you had time now to reflect on the final?
Yeah, I'd say I've had time. It's been what is it? It's been I think it's close to 2 weeks tomorrow. Since obviously the final and that. Yeah, I'll tell you the weekend after it, the Saturday and Sunday was so tough. Um,
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, I said to my mate beforehand on the Thursday that you know if I just beat Tom, I'll be over the moon.
Mm.
Not because I didn't think I could beat him, or I couldn't beat him. Sorry, is the fact that if I was to beat Tom, that was £5,000 in the bag and a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Which at the start of the season, if you told me I'd get that, I'd snap your hand off.
Yeah.
But it's just to have the final in my hands with 1 minute to go and to lose, it stung, and yeah, it genuinely took, I'd say, a good part of a week to really stop like going over and over it in my head. But
It
no,
took
I
pure
think
meditation in the end.
yeah, honestly, it took a lot. Genuinely, I've watched the final 10 minutes back about 15, 20 times, kept replaying it in my head, and obviously it's not good, but I think I need to do that to kind of get over it, if you will. But yeah, I mean, it's been 2 weeks tomorrow, and I think now I'm somewhat over it. There's still times
Yeah.
I'm like, if I just did this for an extra minute or two, I'd be the champion or whatever. But you gotta, I guess you gotta learn from those moments and move on. So yeah, I think now, like I said, 2 weeks on, I'm all right. But
Mm.
yeah, that weekend was a big struggle.
Yeah, so kind of overall, because I was rooting for you from my flat,
Yeah.
even though you couldn't hear me. But the question I kind of had for you is entering the tournament itself. What was your aims for it really? Like, was it to get to the final? Was it to win it? Or what was, did you exceed your expectations? Is kind of the question.
Yeah, so I mean, I played in the ePremier League last season,
Hmm.
and that was like my first major tournament, I'd say.
Mhm.
And going into it, I was pretty good on FIFA 20, but I wasn't like great. Well, I don't think I was good as I am now. But I still, looking at my group last year, I expected myself to get out of it. Long story short, I didn't.
Hmm.
So going away from that, I was very disappointed. So coming into this year, I don't know. I feel like the ePrem this year on both consoles was just so much harder than it has been in any other year.
Mhm.
In my opinion, it's probably the hardest e-league in the world.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so I really and truly, I just played it with no pressure. I just sort of thought, you know what, I'm just gonna play. If I go out in the groups, it is what it is. If I win, it's just even better. And then once it got to the semi-final stage, and I was playing Tom for a playoff spot, I think that's when it was a bit like, okay, I've done very well up to now, but now there's something serious on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where maybe a few nerves come in. But like I said before, I don't really get too nervous. And even in the game, I think I played very well. Um, so yeah, I'd say up until that point, it was literally just a free hit. It was just play. Um, and yeah, when it got to the semi-final, that's when things got a bit more serious.
Yeah, I have to ask because I was going to ask this later on, but you touched on it there. You said you didn't think you were as good at FIFA 20. Like one
Yeah.
thing I always wondered, it isn't just about FIFA. I always wonder about like pro gaming is like how much of a difference is that like different game version coming out? Because like so you are a very good FIFA 21 player. You got to the PlayStation final. Do you then wonder about the next game and like whether or not you'll keep that level kind of thing? I find it quite an interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 100%. I said on a stream earlier, someone asked me basically, do I see myself doing FIFA like for a career long term and stuff? And I was saying, honestly, I don't think anyone can. And I mean
Mm.
anyone. I mean even the likes of Tom, who's arguably the best in the world this year. I mean, I can't see how you take it. I mean, I can't see how he can think 5 years down ahead in terms of FIFA because it really is year to year.
Yeah.
Um, obviously every year there's a new installment of the game. If you compare FIFA 21 to FIFA 19, the the mechanics and the meta are just worlds apart. So
Mm.
unless you adapt, then you're just going to drop off. There's so many unbelievable players from like FIFA 20, even FIFA 19, that are ranked in like like below 500th in the world this year.
Mhm.
You know, and it's just so it just goes to show that you really have got to adapt and stay on top of your game every single year.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because whenever you jump onto a new game, no matter what level you are, there's that adaptation period, and sometimes you do feel, especially for me, maybe it's because I'm getting older, that I'm just I'm not as sharp, or I'm not as good as what I was growing up.
Yeah.
I think when I was playing FIFA, skills were non-existent, and now you start playing 13, 14-year-olds that are doing all sorts of skills that I can't do.
It's unbelievable, man. It's unbelievable.
I end up in tears halfway through the game. But we'll rewind back to the semi-final, because that was really, really epic. And one of the questions I had for you was, how you said you're cool, calm, collected. I get that. How did you keep your edge after those penalty misses? Because I had my hands on my head.
Do you know what? Yeah, I mean, I came out of the blocks firing against Tom. I mean, I think Tom will say it himself. I think he has. Like overall, I fully deserved it.
He did.
And it's just like I can't remember exactly how I went. I think it was. I ended up going 3-1 up. I think it was, and in between those third goals, I think it was. Obviously, I had the 2 penalties.
Yeah.
And on each pen, I told myself to chip it. Now that's not in like a cocky way or to sound like I'm going to chip him and make him look dumb. On FIFA, it's more a case of with the chip pen, it's if the keeper dives one way or tries to stay in the middle up and then dives, so it kind of like covers the middle and the other side they dive. With the chip, they can't save it down the middle compared to a normal shot. So I told myself to do that, and then last minute, I just thought, no, you can't, because obviously the problem is if they save it, you then look pretty bad. You know, you look like you're not. It's a bad thing to do. So yeah, last minute on both pens, I changed my mind, and obviously I went right on the first one, I think, and I went left on the second one. So if I did what I wanted to do in the first place, I would have scored both. But yeah, when I missed that second, I didn't, not during the game, but I think afterwards I was a bit like, do you know what? I should have beaten Tom, one of the best players in the world, if not the best, 5-1, and instead it's 3-2. It's just it just might not meant to be. You know what I mean? It might not. It's just not meant to be. But yeah, it wasn't too much. It was only for like maybe a couple of seconds, because like I say, I knew that I can't think like that going into the second leg. Otherwise, it really would have been game over. Do you know what? Even worse in the pens. I don't know if you remember, but his second goal with Mahrez. I don't know if he passed it into. He tried to pass it to Mahrez, and it hit off my centre back and bounced so perfectly for his Mahrez the volley. And that is something like I think even his reaction showed it. Like it's something that happens maybe once every 100 passes in that situation. You know what I mean? It's so lucky, and it was just like, man. At that point, that's when I was a bit like, it just might not be my day. But yeah, luckily enough, it was. So yeah.
Yeah, Mitch, you did very well not to throw your controller out the window after that. Because I remember seeing that goal. And thinking, you know what? I've had ones like that where the PlayStation's gone straight off, plug out the back.
Yeah.
I've gone and sat in a corner for a bit. Another question I had for you is, obviously without giving all your secrets away, your corners, right? I remember I was watching the game. I thought you scored one where you flicked it on with Van Dijk, and I thought that's really well worked. And you did it again.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, you know what, this guy's gone something. So yeah, is that something you were practicing before the tournament, or you do it all the time?
Yeah, you know, it's obviously we were limited to just Premier League players. So in like in the qualifier this weekend, I mean in any qualifier team this whole year, Van Dijk has not been a consideration at any point.
Yeah.
He's just far too slow. In normal restrictions, he would take up, like his team of the year card would take up a team of the year spot, which is just not worth it when you've got the likes of Mbappe, Ronaldo, Bruno Fernandes. He's just not going to be considered. But I never do this in my normal matches, but because Van Dijk is he's 6'4", absolute mountain of a man. You know, the only person in the whole or any of the Premier League teams that can match Van Dijk is Van Dijk. So as long as you I figured out as long as you manually control Van Dijk and drag him away from the other Van Dijk, you've got a pretty good chance of him being able to win the header. So I implemented that maybe the day before.
Oh wow!
Day before ePremier. So I just added it in, and don't get me wrong, it doesn't work every time. But I noticed in the friendly games it happens maybe once every 5 corners you'd score.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, look, just do it, and then one might come off, and luckily it did against Tom. So
Yeah, what I
yeah,
loved about that was, there's so many intricacies now with FIFA, like
yeah,
all things like the directional nutmeg, all these things, all these now skills you can do, and you effectively beat him with a Sam Allardyce style Tony Pulis corner
yeah,
routine. Beautiful.
yeah.
It's absolutely beautiful.
But it was thought about. That's the thing. It wasn't like
Yeah.
a hit and hope. Like, I genuinely did practice it. So yeah, it might not look great, but it was something. Like again, like I don't think I saw any other player do it in the
Mm.
whole tournament, and we all had the same players. So I'm slightly proud of that, I guess. So yeah,
No, you did really well. I think a lot of people out there will be trying to replicate it, because I think corners are one of those things. Like, I always play them short and work it round,
yeah,
because it's just annoying when you hit into the box and then in 2 passes they've scored at the other end.
Yeah.
So the next question I had for you was, I believe throughout the whole tournament you're a Sheffield United fan, and that's not actually
no,
true.
no, it's not
so
true.
so who do you actually support, Mitch?
I'm an
Is my
Arsenal
question to you.
fan. I'm an
Ah,
Arsenal
very
fan.
good. So we've timed. So for everyone listening, this episode's at 7 p.m. So we will finish in time for Arsenal versus Slavia Prague, the
Yeah,
blockbuster game of the week.
yeah, exactly.
And this is where HS talks about Arsenal for 10 minutes. So if anyone wants to pause their stream or just, leave it on whilst you go to the toilet and come back, then this is a good time.
So how did you end up representing Sheffield United for the ePremier League? How does it all work then?
Yeah, so I basically the Premier League started on FIFA 19,
Mhm.
and I knew about the competitive scene, but I wasn't great. I tried in a few tournaments just to see where I was at and how I could do. So I entered the Premier League for Arsenal.
Mhm.
I qualified for the playoff stage, but I couldn't actually make the day that it was held because obviously this is pre-COVID and stuff. It was at that point it was held at the stadiums, I believe, or
Mhm.
the training grounds, whichever
Oh,
the club
wow.
chose. Yeah, so I was a bit annoyed. Well, not annoyed, but I'd say gutted that I couldn't make that date because obviously they can't change it and stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, I did choose Arsenal the first season, but looking back at that, I think that was a mistake anyway, which I'll get onto
Mhm.
because in FIFA 20, that's when I'd say I took it more seriously, the competitive scene.
Mhm.
And I noticed that in the first year when it was brand new, it was like, oh man, the chance to represent Arsenal. There's like, no way am I picking anyone else. Like that was my mindset. But
Mhm.
going into FIFA 20, I realised that it's more important to get to the event.
Yeah.
It's for my FIFA career, if you will, and CV and stuff like that. It's far better to say that I qualified for the event than got to the playoffs for Arsenal.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, you guys might know, but FaZe Tass obviously plays for Arsenal, and he has done for the past 3 years now.
Mhm.
And he's an unbelievable player still. I don't get me wrong, I believe I could beat him. It's not a case I don't think I could beat him, but it's more a case
Plain
of
talk.
yeah, no, I definitely could. It's just you just don't know, because he's
True.
equally as good. He's a very good player as well. So it's like, do I want to run the risk of not qualifying? You know,
Yeah.
whereas with Sheffield United, like all the pro players, in the UK pro players, we kind of talk to each other, and so we kind of all get a gist of who's going where to avoid each other. Um,
Yeah.
so Sheffield United was one of those clubs that was an option for me last year. I ended up qualifying for them last year. And then basically just the way the club were with me, just behind the scenes, and that they were just brilliant. So I thought, what, for FIFA 21, I'll stick with them. I got given like a parachute into the playoffs, so I didn't have to
Mhm.
play the original qualifier stage, which is quite long and tedious, to be honest.
Mm.
That was quite a big factor as well. So yeah, I mean, and then obviously now, depending on what happens next season, but if I'm able to play in the Premier League, I won't be able to play for Sheffield United. So um, I've been thinking to myself, maybe next year might be the time to go for Arsenal, but
No.
we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
So at Sheffield United, who do you deal with then? Do they have like I don't know, who would you deal with at Sheffield United? Like, how involved would you actually get, like, with that club or with the club that
Yeah,
you're representing?
yeah. So I didn't get to like, because again it was a lot of it. Like I qualified last year on FIFA 20, and then the EPL finals I think were due to be held in March. And then obviously we went into lockdown. So
Mm.
that event was held online. This event was held online. So in terms of like, I guess meeting players and stuff like that, or going up to the club. It just wasn't possible. But they sent me merchandise and they sent me gear and stuff like that, and they were constantly in contact asking how I am, if I need any help with anything, and
Oh
anytime I
wow.
did need help, they were instantly on it. Response normally the very next day. So I'm from what I've heard from some other clubs, obviously I won't name them, but they're just not quite the same. Some of them won't respond at all, and they don't offer any support to the players. So just stuff
Yeah,
like that, because at the end of the day, Sheffield United don't have to do that.
Yeah, true.
They don't. They just don't. So for them to do that, I appreciate it really. So
it's funny because like the management, like, is in like think about the playing squad or the playing team. The management, the coaches, they probably think, they they couldn't care less. But the
yeah,
funny thing is now, the generation of players that are coming through, these are like people that would have played, or these are young players that would have played a lot of FIFA in their youth.
yeah.
Like, so you think like, even like the last decade or decade before, sorry, when you had like Rooney and Co coming through, they probably wouldn't have grown up with the game. Whereas like your Trent Alexander-Arnolds, your Sterlings and Co, like they would have grown up with the game, and they would actually really interested to be involved with their pro gamer. So I
Yeah.
just think that's quite interesting, like facet to it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, yeah, like you said, I think it goes hand in hand, really, doesn't it? I mean, gaming and competitive gaming is only come on, I'd say, in the past few years in general. And then in terms of FIFA, I think FIFA is actually quite a bit behind,
Mm.
and has a lot of catching up to do. But I do think FIFA will get there. And then yeah, like you said, I mean, it's like, imagine in a few years, like you say, with the youngsters that eventually come through at their clubs, they had played a lot of FIFA or video games in general, so they should be very interested in playing, with the club's esports players and whatnot. So yeah, I think there's a lot of great clubs out there that do really integrate their esports players with their actual players. You know, a lot of German clubs are very good at it.
Mm.
PSG is a notable one; they're quite good at it.
Yeah.
Man City in England, I mean, Man City are probably the best um, in England. So there's some clubs that are doing it quite well, but yeah, I think we still got a fair way to go.
Yeah, I've got two questions for you. So what you're trying to hint at is you have a direct contact with the whole Sheffield United squad. Was the first question I had. But no, the more serious question was, what do you mean when you go on about FIFA has a long way to go in e-gaming generally? Because I think that's one of the questions where I have some friends that play some other games, and they used to do it competitively, like League of Legends and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
back when they were doing that, FIFA was the e-gaming scene of FIFA. I remember it being quite small, but in
yeah.
my eyes, because obviously I'm not a competitive player, even though I'd like to be. I thought FIFA would have caught up, but you think it's got a lot to catch up on. So what does it kind of need to do?
I think it just needs a lot more backing. To be brutally honest, I mean the prize pools are shambles in essence. You got to genuinely be top 5, top 10 players in the world to really and truly live off FIFA.
Mm.
I mean, again, you can with your contracts from organisations and sponsorships and stuff like that. But again, it's such a small pool of players that can do that, and for the time and dedication you got to put into it, you know, it's just not worth. It's just not worth it right now. Like even the ePremier League, for instance, the total prize pool for the whole tournament was £40,000.
Yeah, I did think
This
that.
is the biggest league in the world. They earn the
Yeah.
most money by far. I mean, La Liga, for instance, their prize pool was €300,000. The winner of that, I
Mm.
think, won €100,000. Like, you know what I mean? They're the winner of that competition. Their life has changed. You know.
Mm,
Whereas me, I mean, I got top two again, in my opinion, in the hardest E League in the world on the PlayStation. I won £5,000. It's nice, but it's
Mm.
not life changing. It
mm,
doesn't do too much for me. Whereas,
Yeah.
in my opinion, it should. The amount of time and effort and practice and stuff that goes into it. Also, the opponents I had to beat. I don't know, like my run, I had to play Onsal, who's top 20 in the world, Cosmin, who plays for his national team, Romania, and is also just outside the top 100 in the rankings. Ethan, who's a very well known UK player, top 60 in the world, I think he is. Tom, who's obviously very well known, arguably the best in the world. And then Shells. You know, my run was crazy, and I played very well. And it's just even playoffs, which I've qualified for now as well. If I was to go out at the first stage of playoffs, which is very possible, this is argued like the top 64 best players in Europe on the PlayStation. I only walk away with $750.
Mm.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just not
mad. Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I looked at it and I thought, you're representing I know it's like it's the east side of the game, but
Yeah.
you're representing some huge brands in terms of football clubs. You're representing an enormous brand that is the Premier League,
Yeah.
and I would have thought there'd be a lot of people tuning in,
Yeah.
given if the Premier League is advertising this event, in each individual club is advertising it, and each individual club, if you think about it, even the top of the Premier League has a huge following.
Yeah.
Like, all the sponsorship that comes around that, I thought the prize pot would be 10 times what you've just said. And it's just
Exactly.
bonkers.
It should be 10 times minimum. I mean, obviously, I don't want to criticize too much, but the truth is the truth.
You get kicked out.
It is. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'd say openly, but it's like Tom, for instance, who got top 4. He walked away with literally nothing,
Yeah.
and everyone else associated with that competition got paid apart from the players.
Yeah,
Now,
very true.
how on earth does that make any sense? And this is what I mean, where in terms of the player base, I mean, especially on PS4 EU Europe, it is stacked. Like there are like 500 plus top tier players, like very good players, but there's not enough money there to be won.
Yeah.
It just isn't. So that's what I mean in terms of we've got a long way to come. If you compare it to the likes of League of Legends, I think even like Dota, Call of Duty, their prize pools are 10, 20 times, if not more, than what FIFA's ever put up for any competition.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because FIFA is massive. I know these games are as well, League of Legends, etc., Dota, Call of Duty. I used to play Call of Duty as well, but FIFA is like, universally like a huge, huge game. Maybe I'm dwarfing the numbers because I'm a massive football fan, but you go anywhere, people play it, different players. Even now, you go to someone's flat, so it is interesting, and hopefully it can change in the future because you're right. Watching that game for me live. All the games, it was mad because just the speed. It's not so much how you move the ball, right? What the speed is just when you go left and you go right, you go one way, then you go another way, heel to heel, turn, go back, and it's just you're thinking too quick. It's actually mind blowing. But then the next question I kind of had for you was, how did the whole England thing come about as well? Because I think that's pretty cool. How not only is the club thing represented for you as Sheffield United, but also nationally as well.
Yeah, so basically each year there's qualifiers to represent England. So the previous 2 years there's only one person that can represent England on each console, and I believe in both of the previous years it's been won by Tom and Tex. They both won their respective consoles for the past 2 years, and then this year it was announced that the national team will have 2 spots on each console. So, I mean, even if there was still one spot, I would still play because the way I see it is a chance to get my name out there, it's a chance to prove myself against other English players, stuff like that. And obviously that helps in terms of recruitment, sponsorships, anything like that. But again, I mean, going into it, I didn't expect myself to get the spot, but I knew I could, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, obviously the part you guys might watch was on stream and stuff, the top 8. But even before that, there was a qualification stage to get to that point. So it was quite a long process and stuff. But I'd say that's probably my biggest achievement to date, getting the national team spot.
No, that's pretty interesting kind of setup, and obviously representing your country is a really cool thing. I think what we've done on this pod is we've jumped straight into the final, the semi-final, #Tom, the Bukayo Saka. We haven't even mentioned Bukayo Saka because that card was mad.
Yeah.
But the kind of the beginning of it, or the start of it all, the thing is, the reason why I'm obsessed with Bukayo Saka is when it's the Future Stars one, right?
Yeah.
When I saw that card got announced, I thought that card is going to be a problem for a lot of players when you come up against it. And that tournament showed it. But to start it all off, what made you actually decide to go pro? I think that's kind of the big question here. You've done it fairly recently from what you've said. So what was the kind of driving force that pushed you to it?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'd take it back to the start. It's on FIFA 19 was where I started to follow the pro scene more and just like watch tournaments and stuff like that. And with me, I think I'm quite a naturally competitive person. So I'd say I started off like just not from this is like from the get go. I was like an elite 3-player, gold 1 type player. And I saw these pros and I was like, I just want to improve. And I mean, I would play FIFA anyway. So if I'm going to play, I want to be better. I started watching pro tournaments, stuff like that, and eventually I entered into a few smaller tournaments. Did okay, but then towards the end of FIFA 19, I qualified for the Ajax Zygo E-Battle, which was a tournament held. It's a tournament held every year by Ajax, the football club, obviously, who they basically, the winner of that whole tournament gets a pro contract with Ajax. So I managed to qualify for the event in Amsterdam.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it was like the top 8 overall, something like that. So that was when I first was like, okay, maybe I am like getting better. I'm getting to the point where I can take it more seriously. Went to the event, did terribly. I finished bottom of the group. Didn't do too well, but I mean, if anything, it's a blessing in disguise because it kind of taught. Because at the time, I don't know if you guys remember, but FIFA 19 in terms of the meta was terrible.
Yep.
It was like flick up volleys and flick up crosses and all this. People were playing like Varane at right wing and stuff like that, just so they can flick up the ball to cross it into and back post. It was just, in terms of football game, it was absolute farce. It was nonsense, and I refused to adjust to it. I had like my ways, and I was set in stone of playing football, and I'm not gonna use all these tactics and all that. But that was my downfall. So going into FIFA 20, I kind of thought, I'm gonna keep it going because obviously I can qualify for these events, or I can compete against them. So yeah, I just basically played in the qualifiers. I didn't do anything special, but I did okay. I did better than the previous year. Tried to play more to the meta, which was better on FIFA 20. It was more of a football game. And then, like I said before, I qualified for the ePremier League, which was my first major tournament. And that was a big moment, really, because I think until you qualify for a major, you're just basically playing. You're not going to be signed. No one really knows who you are because you haven't done anything. No one's going to respect you. You just basically got to keep trying to prove yourself. So that was a big moment, and then I continued to play in smaller tournaments. I ended up going to Valencia for a similar tournament to the Ajax one. I did a bit better in that, but again, it wasn't good enough. And then finally, towards the end of the year, there was another one for Lyon, which was held in like June, July of last year. So it was in lockdown, so unfortunately we couldn't go to Lyon. But I actually won that whole tournament, and the original prize was a contract with Lyon. Something like Champions League final tickets, hospitality all covered, signed shirts, like a bunch of crazy stuff.
Wow.
And then I won the tournament, and they told me afterwards that the prizes have been changed due to COVID. And at the time, I was absolutely devastated because it was man, I've just won this tournament to sign a pro contract with Lyon. It's a very big football club, and that's just been taken away from me through no fault of my own. But again, that was a similar moment to Ajax, where it was like, okay, I've now won an event like this. I should have a pro contract. I don't, but it proves that I can do it. So yeah, going into FIFA 20, obviously these sort of achievements and tournaments, they've obviously stacked up at this point. And that's when I managed to sign with Rise.
Yeah.
Which, I'll be honest, I mean, when they offered me a contract and stuff, I was a bit surprised myself because I didn't think I'd done enough to earn it. That's just the truth. But I mean, they must have seen something, or thank God they backed me because obviously this season's gone very well. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like in this FIFA esports scene, you kind of need that luck. There's so many fantastic players out there, and it's so hard to really, like I said, prove yourself. Like you got to qualify for a major, in my opinion. So to get that backing and support at that point was really important to me, and it's obviously helped me this year massively. So yeah, I think this year I've still got a lot more to do, but I think I've cemented myself this year as like a professional FIFA player, if you will.
Yeah, I was literally just about to ask about Rise because you mentioned like unless as a FIFA player you go to a big tournament, you get into the qualifying, you end up going to a tournament and putting yourself on the stage, then you're just another FIFA player. But I suppose now that you're with someone like Rise, and there's a lot of different kind of, I don't even know what to call them, like like groups, I suppose. Now that you're with them, and I know you do Twitch with them as well, and they have a backing and they do other sports as well, does that now kind of cement? I mean, we talked about earlier different, FIFA 2022 come out and you might not be as good at that and that might be a problem, but just having this contract with Rise and being involved in that kind of franchise, does that provide some longevity to what you're doing now?
I think it definitely helps. Like I said, at the time when I was offered the contract, it was a surprise. I didn't expect to be offered a contract by a team of their size. I had other offers, and I would have signed another offer if they didn't come in for me. But when they did, it was obviously a no-brainer because like they're back, that they're like I said, they have so many other teams in other esports already. Like they compete in Call of Duty, Valorant.
Gears of War, I saw
Gears
actually.
of War is a big, the Gears of War's a big one. Street Fighter, they compete in another one, and they've done very well in those esports. So they wanted to test out FIFA and see how it is for them, and yeah, I mean, just the size they are and the backing they have. I mean, they're owned by Roger Saffold, who's a NFL player, big time NFL player. So to have that kind of backing and stuff, it's obviously brilliant. And then just like you said, I mean, going to FIFA 22, I think I've done well enough this year to earn a contract for next year. But like I said before, it really is year to year.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Going into next year, if I then don't perform well enough, there's every chance in FIFA 23 I don't get a contract, and then it's like, okay, but then now what? So
yeah.
For me, FIFA's great and stuff, but it just can't be the priority all the time,
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, eventually, what would you actually? The question I'm going to ask you is, what would you do next? Do you have another thought? Is that too far ahead? First of all, you got to win the ePremier League. That's the first thing, because your fans, including myself, we need to see you take the title home eventually, maybe next year or the year after. But if you were saying you can't really look 5 years ahead, or you can't plan that far ahead, what would you say you do next? Would you go into YouTube content, as in the guys like Harry Hesketh and load videos all the time? Is that what you'd go into, or would you just take a break altogether?
Yeah, well, honestly, I don't know. I mean, I've just started. I tried to stream last year in the summer. It's going well and stuff, but I didn't have a proper setup. I tried to buy the equipment and stuff, but my laptop refused to run OBS, which is the software you need to stream and that. So I ended up stopping. But now, signing with England and stuff, I've been given a setup, thankfully, which means I can now stream. So my plan now is to just stream and maybe potentially start YouTube. Again, that's not me thinking, I'm going to stream into YouTube for the next 5 years. It's just something I'm going to do, and if it goes well, it goes well. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't know. It's almost winging it. It's almost playing it by ear. I mean, I'm a uni student, so that's priority at the end of the day, and I think that's something to and that's my long term. It's my degree.
Definitely.
Making sure I do well in that, and then hopefully if I'm playing FIFA in the next 3-4 years, that's brilliant. But I'm not sitting here thinking I'm going to be, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it's always good. Out of interest, what are you studying?
Accounting and financial management.
Oh yeah, fair enough. What would you give it out of 10? So FIFA's obviously a 10 out of 10. What would you give your degree so far out of 10?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's okay. I mean, I'd give it maybe a 6 or 7.
Yeah, that's good. I'd give mine a solid 2. I did chemistry. So I studied chemistry, so we'll leave that one there. Yeah. I kind of think one of the last questions I wanted to ask you is, obviously we spoke about how you became a pro, and we spoke about some of the competitions you'll be doing and the whole England thing. How much do you practice, and how often?
Well, I mean, it all depends. I mean, at the start of the year, you're going in hard. You're playing. I'd say depends on the time I have, but I'd say at least 6 hours a day, up to 12.
Okay.
It's a lot. It's like serious. Obviously, you don't have to do that, but I think that's something that's definitely helped me this year. Is really grinding it out hard at the start. Now it's not so much. I'd say now, after this, I watched the Arsenal game, and then maybe I'll play maybe 2 or 3 games after the Arsenal game, and that's it today. And then tomorrow I'll play, because it's the day before the qualifier tomorrow, so I'll play I'll play a few hours tomorrow, but it just all depends. I'd say nowadays it's more just playing in tournaments and playing a few friendlies here and there. Whereas at the start of a FIFA, if you any free time you have for the most part is you've got to be playing. You just have to be. So it just depends on the time of the year, I'd say.
Wow, that's a big commitment. I get quite tired playing weekend league.
It's huge. Yeah.
So that's actually really, really crazy. But it's interesting to know. I could touch back on the point about how it's really important to incentivize these competitions more, because you're right. I can see the quality from my screen at home when I watch you guys, but then when you then add in the hours it actually takes to even get to that level, then it's just absolutely mad. So
and you're someone that knows. So I mean, for someone that's just put on Sky Sports or wherever it was on, and as watching it, and obviously they can see, okay, look, these guys are good at FIFA, right? That's obvious. But you know, what have they been just picked? Have they been chosen to be here? Like, whereas honestly, the process to get just to that point alone, let alone get to the point I did in the competition, it's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of playing and grinding and watching games back, and it's a lot. So that's what I mean. Like the hours people put in, people are putting in hours like it's a full-time job, and some people are literally getting nothing financially from it.
That's mad.
You know, it's crazy. No, it is. It's genuinely insane. That's why when I got that contract with Rise and stuff, it was a blessing almost.
Well, right, Mitch, thank you so much for your time this evening. We will let you go for the game, which kicks off in just under 20 minutes now. But thank you so much for your time this evening, and good luck with the future.
Yeah, I appreciate it. No worries, boys. Have a good one.
Yeah, cheers. Cheers. Thanks a lot.